Hello and Hag Sameach. Happy Hanukah, everybody. Every year, I celebrate this 8-night Jewish holiday by designing 8 Pokémon variants that are inspired by Jewish culture. Let's not waste candlelight and jump right into things, starting with Mareep. Sheep appear everywhere in Jewish mythology, as the first people to practice Judaism were primarily shepherds. Because of this, many of our ritual objects, such as the shofarot we blow during the New Year or the talitot we wear when praying, are made with parts from this animal. Sheep are so important that they're the first animal other than humans to be named within our religious texts. This happens in the story of Cain and Abel, which is about 2 brothers, one a farmer, the other a shepherd. After seeing how everyone prefers Abel's sick-ass sheep to Cain's lame old plants, Cain gets so jealous that he bonks his bro over the head and invents murder. Farmers and ranchers have been fighting ever since. But what if we could turn Mareep into a Pokémon that both of these groups could appreciate? A creature that's flora and fauna. Medieval Europeans did believe that cotton came from some sort of plant-sheep hybrid, and when their wool's grown out, sheep do look a lot like shrubbery.
It is a good shrubbery!
We could even give this Mareep variant a similar mechanic to furfroos, where you can trim its fur into specific shapes the way that people do with hedges. To incorporate more of this grass typing, I turned Mareep's horns into flower bulbs and made the exposed part of its tail resemble a branch. Fat-tailed sheep breeds are super popular among Southwest Asian Jewish communities, as they consider the tails for which they're named to be a delicacy. So, I added some of that extra padding onto my Mareep.
Mareep, the wool Pokémon, a grass type. Mareep's wool is structurally similar to plant fibers. While valued for its strength, the texture is rough.
For Flaafy, we'll be taking inspiration from another sheep story, one some of you probably saw coming the moment I mentioned shrubbery. That's right, folks! We're setting Flaafy on fire to reference the legend of the burning bush. Don't worry though, the flames won't hurt it. That's the whole point. In this story, a lamb led the prophet Moshe, or Moses as folks call him in English, to a bush that was covered in flames. Upon getting closer, Moshe noticed that beneath the flames, the bush was still completely intact and not showing any signs of damage. This bush was actually a disguised angel, trying to get Moshe's attention so it could tell him to stop mucking around with the sheep and go liberate his people from slavery. I thought it would be neat if instead of Flaafy's wool growing from follicles in its skin, it was more like a moss that spread across its body. People would harvest the wool from Flaafy's torso, but leave spots on its head and tail be so that it could replenish itself. This Flaafy has 2 forms, one that's a pure grass type, and another where it gains the fire typing, as its wool is now ablaze. Getting hit by a fire type move in its grass form would cause it to switch to its other instead of taking damage, and it would revert to its grass form after returning to its Pokeball. The bulbs that were on Mareep's head have now bloomed, and the beginnings of horns are starting to sprout from them. I tried to make Flaafy's tail resemble the type of oak wood rod that shepherds used to use to fight off predators. Flaafy could use it to ward off threats to its flock with moves like Slam or Iron Tail.
Flaafy, the wool Pokémon, a grass and sometimes fire type. Flaafy's wool is valued for its fire-resistant properties, but it will attack anyone who tries to shear it completely.
The final stage in the Mareep line is my beloved Ampharos. Jotonian Ampharos are valued for their use as beacons, which is perfect since the burning bush was a beacon too. Since Diacynthian Ampharos creates light using fire instead of electricity, it could be used to send smoke signals, which in Jewish mythology were used to indicate the start of a battle. Instead of the jewel that usually dots Ampharos's forehead, I placed a little strip of fabric that's supposed to represent the oil-soaked cloths that Jews used to wrap around shorn sheep's foreheads. This was done in hopes that it would keep them warm, and I'd love to learn if there's any scientific basis for this. I played around with having Ampharos's bushy tail grow little fire berries, but I felt they made the design too cluttered. Then I realized that Ampharos doesn't even need 2 forms. Now that it's fully evolved, why not keep it burning? I spent a while messing around with Ampharos's horns, since I wanted them to resemble shofarot, those sheep horns I mentioned Jews play around the New Year. The problem wasn't getting them to resemble shofarot, but figuring out how to angle them, since the angle of the horns has a huge impact on Ampharos' silhouette. While Ampharos' fire typing provides a visual beacon, its horns could be used to emit an audible one. Shofars are loud and meant to be heard from far away, so Ampharos could be used by firefighters as a siren.
Ampharos, the light Pokémon, a grass and fire type. Ampharos are drawn to the scent of smoke and will blow their horns loudly if they uncover a wildfire.
Despite doing this project to celebrate Hanukah, so far I've ever only made one Pokémon that's based around this holiday, my menorah chandelure. Let's remedy that, because the Pokémon Baltoy reminds me a lot of another Hanukah symbol, the Dreidel. Its name even sounds like Baltoy's evolutions. Oh Claydol, 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 I caught you in Hoenn. When I find you in Galar, you'll join my team again. A Dreidel is a four-sided spinning top that's used to play gambling games on Hanukah. Each side is decorated with a letter from the Ketava Shuri, the alphabet that most Jewish languages are written in. The letter you land on determines how much money you either gain or have to give up. Although these days, people tend to gamble for candy instead of coins. I turned these letters into handles that are popping out from each of the Baltoy's sides, and adjusted the shape of its torso to match that of a standard Dreidel. The festival of Hanukkah celebrates an ancient revolt against the Seleucid Empire, which had occupied the ancient Jews' lands and was trying to overwrite their culture. Legend has it that we invented this game as an excuse to congregate without drawing suspicion. We aren't planning a resistance, we're just, gambling. But this isn't true. Both the "we're not planning a resistance" and the ancient Jews invented this parts. Dreidel is actually a variant of European games, such as Teetotum and Trendle, that European Jews put their own spin on just a few hundred years ago. That's why so much of the terminology surrounding this game comes from Yiddish, the language traditionally spoken by German Jews, instead of any of the languages that Jews in the Seleucid Empire would have spoken. Due to their use in gambling, I decided to swap Baltoy's psychic typing for the dark one. Shout out to Grimsley. Maybe it could have an ability that works like an amulet coin, increasing the amount of money you win from a Pokémon battle, but also how much you have to pay if you lose. Seeing as dark types are associated with mischief, perhaps in the Pokémon world, it was the Baltoy themselves that created this rumor they were involved in the creation of Khanukah. I hadn't known the true origins of the Dreidel when I started this design, and am I disappointed that they're not actually the ancient Jewish symbol I'd thought they were? Yeah. But is it important to acknowledge facts even when you don't like them? Also yeah. And there's no denying that even if Dreidels have a different origin story than the one I was taught, they're definitely part of Jewish culture today.
Baltoy, the clay-top Pokémon, a ground and dark type. The side it falls upon after fainting in battle can grant its opponent good or bad luck.
Jewish mythology boasts plenty of magical swords, so I wanted to give the Honedge line a try. For the first member of this line, I took inspiration from a ritual object that was used by medieval German Jews, the Kreismesser. In Jewish culture, pregnancy, labor, and the weeks following it are considered periods where parents and newborns are especially vulnerable to spirits called Shedim. Shedim are forces of nature, and like nature, they can get pretty destructive. To protect the family from such Shedim, one would hang up amulets, recite prayers, and use a Kreismesser to ward them off. These blades were often inscribed with symbols such as holy names, which we'll elaborate on in Doublade's section, and eyes, which would allow the blade to see Shedim that humans can't. Such eyes were also the inspiration for a Geodude line I made back in 2023. That video, along with all of my other Fakemon designs, can be found in a playlist that I linked in the description. The Kreismesser would be swung in a circle around the person who had given birth every night for a full Jewish month. We have our own calendar. Sometimes while the person slept, it would be kept suspended above their bed or under their pillow to provide some extra protection. Diacinthian Honedge would provide a similar service, staying awake all night to guard the new family. While Colossian Honedge's tassel leeches the life from anyone it wraps around, I promise the Diacynthian ones is harmless. If anything, it could be used as a blanket for the baby, or to rock them to sleep. Due to the Kreismesser's protective nature, I replaced Honedge's ghost typing with the fighting one, as that would make it super effective against any dark-type Pokemon looking to cause trouble. I had considered the psychic typing due to all the barrier moves those Pokemon can specialize in, but being weak to dark, ghost, and bug types when those are the Pokemon most likely to try breaking into your house just doesn't make sense.
Honedge, the sword Pokemon, a steel and fighting type. Never needing sleep, this Pokemon keeps constant watch over its loved ones.
Honedge evolves into Doublade, which is one of those cases where Game Freak looked at a Pokemon and went, what if for its evolution, there was more of them? There aren't any legends or historical instances that I know of that involve a Jew dual-wielding swords, unless we're counting Shadowcat from X-Men. I ended up working backwards, designing Aegislash first, and then using Doublade to bridge the gap between its design and my Honedge's. I'd based Aegislash on a Khopesh instead of a Kreismesser, a type of sword that was popular in the period that most of Jewish mythology takes place in. If I'd been smart, I'd have based Doublade's design on a sword from somewhere between those periods, so that each evolution was going further and further back in time. But instead, I was hasty, and just made Doublade more Khopeshes. Everybody, boo me in the comments. Khopesh-style swords originated in Mesopotamia, and eventually spread to the ancient Jews, who would have held the Khopesh in one hand and a shield in the other, instead of dual-wielding them the way that LARPers like to. I mentioned earlier how some Kreismessers have holy names engraved in their blades. In Judaism, names carry a lot of power, and there are some you're only supposed to write down or say in very particular situations. In Jewish folklore, a man named Methuselah realized that inscribing certain names onto his sword allowed it to harm Shadim, which are usually immune to mortal weapons. Fearing this development, the Shadim taught humanity other ways to ward them off, such as those amulets I mentioned in Honedge's section. In exchange, humanity promised that we would prioritize these non-lethal methods of protecting ourselves, and only use swords like Methuselah's against Shadim that ignored these wards and were genuinely trying to kill us. In this spirit, Doublade would never attack without warning, and prefer to try to scare its opponents off. But if its opponent ignores these warnings and strikes anyways, Doublade sure strikes back.
Doublade, the sword Pokemon, a steel and fighting type. This Pokemon crosses its blades to intimidate its opponents by resembling a scary face.
Aegislash is known as the royal sword Pokemon, as it could identify future kings and would use its ghostly powers to gain influence over them. But our Aegislash isn't a ghost type. If anything, this protective Pokemon would try to defend kings from such influences. While the blade is based on a Khopesh, my Aegislash's primary inspiration was King David, who was frequently persecuted by the king that preceded him. This king would be welcoming to David one moment, only to lash out at him the next, enraged that it would one day be David wearing his crown and influencing the people. This king kinda sounds like one possessed by a Colossian Aegislash, no? During the medieval period, a legend arose among German Jews that King David had owned a golden shield. Much like the aforementioned swords, this shield was inscribed with holy names that gave it magical properties. In the 13th century, people started writing these names in the shape of a six-pointed star when they depicted the shield. Such stars, also known as hexagrams, appear in multiple cultures, typically as a decorative symbol. Before it was linked to King David's shield, Jews primarily saw it as one of those protective wards that the Shadim had taught us. Hexagrams were actually associated more with King David's son, since they were often depicted on the magic ring he would use to command Shadim. In the 1500s, European Jewish communities started to incorporate the star into their governmental seals. Over the next 3 centuries, it came to be known as the Magen David, and caught on worldwide as a symbol of Jewish identity, much like the cross is to Christians or the star and crescent is to Islam.
Aegislash, the royal sword Pokemon, a steel and fighting type. This Pokémon is rivals with its Colossian variant, as it tries to purge people from the latter's influence.
For my final design, I took inspiration from the Magen David again, as there's a certain star-shaped Pokémon that's gotten into the design discourse. I speak, of course, of Starmie, since folks have been pretty pressed about its mega evolution. I'm glad that some people are having fun with it, but I find this design more lazy than amusing, and feel like Game Freak was relying on us to just make memes about it and overlook their lack of effort. Let's just set aside its mega for now, and see what we can do with the Diacynthian variant. Starmie is shaped like two 5-limbed starfish that have gotten stuck together, while the Magen David consists of interlocking triangles. I reduced the number of Starmie's limbs so that each starfish had only 3, in order to match the 3 points of a triangle so that Starmie's silhouette would resemble a Magen David. But what about that gem at its core? It and its golden encasing made me think about the Choshen Mishpat, a magical breastplate the High Priest used to wear back when we actually had one. The reason we don't anymore is because the High Priest oversaw Judaism's main temple, but then the Romans destroyed it. This breastplate had rows of precious stones that were set into gold, with each stone representing one of the 12 tribes that practiced Judaism. However, while we know what each stone was called, we don't agree on what type of stones they'd actually be, which is why it often varies in jewelry based on this symbol. Due to the importance of these stones, I replaced Starmie's water typing with rock, thinking it could use attacks like Rock Blast to reference how King David defeated one of his enemies with just a stone and a slingshot. I kept the psychic typing, since it said whenever the High Priest asked the Choshen Mishpat a question, it would answer him by shining light in different patterns. Divination is associated with the psychic type. As for the main color of Starmie's body, the garment the High Priest wore beneath the breastplate was supposed to be a mix of blue, purple, gold, and scarlet, which is far too many colors for a single Starmie. While I was originally just going to make it blue, in the end I blended all of the colors together and got whatever you call this one.
Starmie, the mysterious Pokémon, a rock and psychic type. Much like Behem, this Pokémon communicates through flashing lights that people have yet to decipher.
And there we go. 8 Pokémon for 8 nights. If you want to see even more of my Fakemon designs, including Hanukah projects from previous years, check out the playlist that's linked in the description. If you want to support me in the creation of future Fakemon and get access to behind-the-scenes content, check out my Patreon, where you can unlock weekly updates for as little as $1 a month. Becoming a paid patron also gets your name into the credits of my videos, as you can see now. Wow, this could be you! I hope those of you with holidays coming up enjoy them, and that we all stay safe and smiling. Thanks for watching, folks!